Yes, and to help us build up to that first test in Adelaide, in fact, the whole series, I'm delighted to welcome back to World is One a dear friend, former New Zealand cricketer Chris Harris, who joins me from Christchurch. Chris, very nice to have you on the show again. This, as I mentioned, is one of the most eagerly anticipated series of the year. Big one for India, as any tour down under is. They're searching for their first test series win, but equally crucial for Australia as well, because this is the first time they're playing at home since that ball tampering scandal.
Yeah, thanks, Rahul. Yeah, look, what a brilliant test series. Look, let me set it up for you. For me, it's a wonderful opportunity for India, who, look, we all know that they are magnificent at home. And look, I've really been supporting India. I think they've got the side to win overseas. That's the one thing that probably still irks a little bit the Indian side and Virat Kohli is their ability to win away from home. Now, what an opportunity to take on this Australian side, who some would argue there's a little bit of turmoil. There's ex-players coming out and making comments, and the management saying everything's fine. They're trying to play a little bit slightly different style to what Australia normally play. They normally come all guns blazing with plenty to say, and we've been assured by the management and the senior players that that's not the way we're going to go forward. We're going to play hard, but there's not going to be much chat. And then on Australia side as well, they'll be desperately keen to do well, and it's going to be very tough against this Indian side, purely to prove all the supporters wrong that they can play good cricket without Steve Smith and Dave Warner. But look, there's a lot of inexperienced players in this Australian side, so it's going to be a brilliant series, and both teams, as you do have in any test series, but this one particularly, have got a lot to play for.
It's interesting those things you said about Australia, because there has been a lot of talk, Chris, of them being vulnerable of late. South Africa's Faf du Plessis said after their ODI series against the Aussies that he thought that the team had gone a little soft. Do you share that view, or do you think, like we've heard from multiple members of the Indian camp, that Australia will still be a formidable force in their own backyard?
Oh, look, Australia are going to be a great side at home, whichever team they put out. It's very hard when you lose quality players like Dave Warner and Steve Smith. So, look, there is going to be a little bit of inexperience. You've got guys coming in. I think Marcus Harris making his test debut. So there is going to be a little bit of inexperience in that top and middle order. So it's always going to be tough. But look, Australia at home are always tough. I feel a little bit sorry for this team because they're already under immense pressure. And then you've got senior players coming out and, having a go at them as well. I mean, look, I think they mean well, but all that really does is add pressure to a side that's already under immense pressure. They're desperately keen to go out and to get the supporters in Australia behind them. They've had a lot of negative press in recent times that we know all about. So they are very keen to go out to show that they can play in a fair, if you like, and good sportsmanship mentality and still win. So, yeah, look, I think that the senior, as I said, the ex-players coming out just adds that much more pressure. So, look, I still think this Australian side is a very, very good side, and any Australian side at home is always extremely difficult to beat.
Okay, Chris, let's talk about India and the batting in particular, because we've seen, with the exception of Virat Kohli, the rest of the lineup has struggled on the away tours to England and South Africa this year. Under preparation was a factor there. We spoke about this at the end of the South Africa series. But they've gone with the extra batter for the opening test in Adelaide and just the 4 bowlers. Do you think this is a prudent decision?
Yeah, look, I think so. If they're concerned that their batting's been a little bit light, and it has, and they've used lack of preparation, well, they can't use that excuse now because they've had obviously plenty of cricket. Look, they are going to Australia, which is slightly different conditions, but I think part of the issue has been their batting, so hence the reason they're looking at playing an extra batter, which, they hope not to use because they hope that the top order do the job, but it just gives them a little bit of solidarity, if you like, or solidness in that middle to lower order. But what it does mean is it strengthens out the batting, but it puts immense pressure on the bowling. And I see Australia have gone down a similar vein. So you're playing 3 seamers and a spinner. So, what that means to me is that both teams are looking to strike early. So if they don't strike early, it's going to mean a lot of overs from Lyon and Ashwin. So I'm really looking forward to that contest as well. 2 off spinners. Ashwin, not so much in the traditional sense, but Lyon certainly is. Oh, that's going to be a great competition within itself to see which one of the two off-spinners bowls well, because that's going to be key for me if they're only going to play one spinner in this Test series.
What's the challenge going to be like for the Indian pacers, Chris? Jasprit Bumrah, Ishant Sharma and Mohammad Shami were impressive in helpful conditions in England and South Africa, but the conditions aren't really the same in Australia, are they? They also conceded over 500 runs against a modest Cricket Australia 11 in the warm-up game last week. Would that be a cause for concern for you?
Oh, it's always a little bit of a concern, but look, the quality bowlers, they've both played in Australia. I've seen Ishant Sharma play in Australia, and because of his height, he gets that extra bounce, so that helps him in the Australian wickets. We know how good Shami is, got the ability to swing it. Look, on their day, they're as good as anyone out there. So, look, it just depends on the day, how they go, what the conditions are like. Hopefully, they'll be looking at the wicket and hoping it's a little bit green and there's a little bit of overcast and some good humidity so you can get the swing. Bumrah a little bit earlier on his Test career, so he'll really be looking at those other two, hopefully to set the scene. But he's making his way as well and had some great performances in Test cricket. So, look, there's going to be pressure on all three of those seamers because they really have to strike early. But, look, no, I've got faith that those two guys will do the job. They've got the experience and, as I said, they're quality bowlers. They will be feeling a little bit nervous, though, as you said, in the warm-up game, that they perhaps went for a few too many runs. But what they will argue is for them it was a bit about, just getting through their overs, acclimatising to the conditions and just trying a few things out. And you don't want to show all your cards in the warm-up game. So, look, I'm sure that's what they'll be saying. And come the first Test, they'll be rearing to go.
I also want to talk to you, Chris, about what they're calling the Virat Kohli factor. What a series he had in England. He was phenomenal on his last tour to Australia as well, scoring back-to-back hundreds in the Adelaide Test. Australia have said several times in the build-up to this first Test match that they aren't focusing solely on Kohli, but he really is key to India's fortunes, isn't he? Is he the decisive factor in this series for you?
Oh, it certainly is. Look, he's a huge factor. I mean, it isn't any series. Look, Australia won't be focusing on him because I think Virat Kohli is his absolute best when other teams target him and, go after him and maybe have a wee chat to him. That's when I think, for me, he's a little bit like Steve Waugh in that sense. If you go really hard at him, he comes hard back at you. So, look, I think they're better. And I think that's the reason they're saying they're not focusing on him. For that entire reason. But if you look at what he did last time he's in Australia, I think he scored 692 runs at some ridiculous average. And then you look at someone like Rahul, who had a very good series, who scored 399, almost half the amount of runs. So that's the type of influence he has. Australia will be saying they won't focus on him, but trust me, they are. And they know that if they get him early, that gives them a really good opportunity to run through this Indian side. So, look, make no mistakes about it. Australia know the importance of his wicket. They'll be playing it down in the press, but they'll be definitely making plans on not only how they can try and get him out early, but if he gets in, what sort of plan they're going to try and bowl to him. I'm suggesting they might have a little bit of an in-outfield to try and stop him hitting those boundaries because he loves to go after the opposition. And if you can cut down his boundaries, that's one way that you can maybe add a little bit of pressure and maybe make him go away from his natural game and try and do something a little bit out of the ordinary. But, yeah, he's going to be absolutely decisive.
Okay, one final question for you, Chris. Where do you think this series is going to be decided? Because we've spoken about the strengths and weaknesses of both camps, but all things put together, they seem to stack up reasonably evenly, don't they?
Yeah, it does match up reasonably evenly. I think the big advantage that India have, they just have a little bit more experience. We've just already talked about the Virat Kohli, the role that he's going to play, and I think he possibly could be the difference. So, look, it is very even. Both teams have gone in with three seamers and one spinner. So the makeup of both sides is very, very similar. I just think India have got that little bit more experience. But then some would argue Australia are under the pump. And when they're under pressure, they normally respond. And also, because they're playing at home, that gives them that little advantage. They just know the conditions a little bit better. So, look, it is a very even series. But for me, India go in slightly favourites because of their little bit more experience and the Virat Kohli factor.
Want to venture a quick prediction, Chris?
I think there's going to be a draw. I think India are going to win 1-0. And I think weather will come in as well.
So you're going for 3 draws from the 4 test matches. That really would be something, Chris, because we don't seem to see too many drawn tests anymore.
Okay, well, you're putting me under pressure now. I'm going to say 2-0 to India then. There'll be 2 draws. Because one will be affected by weather, I'm sure. They'll lose a day somewhere or 2. And the other game, I think Australia will bounce back because they need to, and they'll play well enough to draw.
Okay, 2-0 to India, says Chris Harrison. How the Indians will celebrate if that does eventually turn out to be the series scoreline. Chris, we look forward to your analysis right through this test series. Thanks for joining me today to set it up for our viewers. It's been a pleasure.